When alien Queen Ziraleth gave David a choice between marrying her daughter or death, he never expected the real challenge would be surviving love. David Rodriguez had dreamed of this moment his entire life. Standing in the gleaming corridors of humanity's first interstellar diplomatic vessel, the Unity, he could hardly believe he was really here. At 28, he was the youngest member of the team selected to make contact with an alien civilization. His specialty in alien biology and cultural studies had earned him this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The planet below looked like a jewel against the black of space. Zephyria was covered in purple oceans and silver landmasses that seemed to shimmer in the light of their orange sun. After 3 months of travel, they had finally arrived at what could be humanity's greatest discovery. "Are you ready for this, Rodriguez?" asked Captain Williams, checking her equipment one final time. The entire diplomatic team was nervous. They had studied every piece of information they could gather about the Valkorians, but there was still so much they didn't know. David nodded, trying to calm his racing heart. "As ready as anyone can be for meeting aliens, I suppose." The shuttle ride down to the planet's surface was smooth. Valkorian technology was clearly advanced beyond anything humans had developed. Their cities rose from the landscape like crystalline mountains, with buildings that seemed to grow rather than being constructed. Everything had flowing organic curves that made human architecture look rigid and blocky by comparison. The landing platform was enormous, easily the size of 3 football fields. Hundreds of Valkorians had gathered to witness this historic meeting. They were tall, graceful beings with pale blue skin that had an almost metallic sheen. Their features were sharp and elegant, and their large eyes held an intelligence that was immediately obvious to anyone who looked at them. But what struck David most was their silence. Despite the crowd, there was no sound except for a low musical humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It wasn't unpleasant, more like a gentle vibration that you felt in your bones rather than heard with your ears. The human delegation was led across the platform toward a massive structure that could only be described as a palace. Its walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft, changing colors. As they walked, David noticed that every Valkorian they passed stopped what they were doing to watch them. There was curiosity in their stares, but also something else he couldn't quite identify. Inside the palace, the ceiling stretched so high, it disappeared into shadows. Strange. Floating lights drifted through the air like luminous jellyfish, providing a warm golden glow. The floors were smooth as glass but felt warm under their feet. Everything about this place spoke of a civilization far older and more advanced than humanity. The throne room was vast beyond imagination. At its center sat a figure that commanded immediate attention and respect. Queen Ziraleth was larger than the other Valkorians, with skin that gleamed like polished silver. Her crown wasn't made of metal or jewels, but seemed to be formed from the same living crystal as the palace walls. When she looked at the human delegation, her eyes seemed to see right through them. "Welcome, travelers from the distant world," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the enormous space without seeming to be raised. "We have watched your approach with great interest." Captain Williams stepped forward and began the carefully prepared first contact speech. She spoke about peace, mutual understanding, and the hope for friendship between their two species. It was a good speech, one that had been worked on by dozens of diplomats and scientists back on Earth. Queen Ziraleth listened politely, but David got the distinct impression that she was only half paying attention to the captain's words. Instead, her gaze kept shifting to study each member of the human team. When those alien eyes fell on him, David felt a strange tingling sensation, as if something was gently probing the edges of his mind. The Queen's expression changed subtly when she looked at him. Her head tilted slightly, and for a long moment she stared at David with an intensity that made him deeply uncomfortable. He could feel sweat beading on his forehead despite the comfortable temperature in the throne room. When Captain Williams finished her speech, Queen Ziraleth rose from her throne with fluid grace. "Your words speak of friendship and cooperation," she said, her voice now carrying a strange undertone that hadn't been there before. "This pleases us. However, there are matters that must be addressed immediately." She raised one slender hand and the lights in the room dimmed. Suddenly, holographic images filled the air around them. David recognized star maps, DNA sequences, and what looked like complex mathematical equations. But there were other images too, ones that made no sense to his human eyes. "Our scanners have analyzed each member of your delegation," the Queen continued, her eyes now fixed solely on David. Most interesting discoveries have been made. David felt his mouth go dry. The way she was looking at him made him feel like a specimen under a microscope. You, she said, pointing directly at him. Step forward. Captain Williams moved as if to protest, but a gentle gesture from the Queen froze her in place. David realized with growing alarm that the Valkorians possessed some form of mental influence over other beings. On shaking legs, David approached the throne. The Queen descended the crystal steps until she stood directly in front of him. Up close, he could see that her skin wasn't just silver, but contained swirling patterns of color that shifted like oil on water. Your genetic structure is most unusual, she said, circling him slowly. Our analysis shows markers that are exceedingly rare among your species. These markers, combined with our royal bloodline, would produce offspring of extraordinary capability. David's heart nearly stopped. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, but I don't understand what you're asking. Queen Ziralith smiled, revealing teeth that were perfectly white but slightly pointed. I am not asking, young human. I am declaring. You will join with my daughter, Princess Kaylara, and together you will create the bridge between our peoples. The throne room fell completely silent. David could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Your Majesty, with all due respect, I think there's been some misunderstanding. I'm here as a scientist and diplomat, not for personal arrangements. The Queen's smile faded, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. There is no misunderstanding. Our customs are clear. When the Queen of the Valkorians chooses a mate for her heir, that choice is final and absolute. Captain Williams finally found her voice. Your Majesty, surely we can discuss this. Our cultures are very different, and this kind of arrangement isn't something we can agree to without proper negotiation. Queen Ziralith turned her gaze to the captain, and David saw William stiffen as if struck by an invisible force. Captain of the humans, you will not speak again unless spoken to. This matter concerns only myself and the Chosen One. She looked back at David, and her voice took on a tone that was both regal and absolutely terrifying. You will remain here as our honored guest. You will learn our ways and prepare for the joining ceremony. This is not a request or a negotiation. This is the will of the Queen. David's mind raced, trying to find some diplomatic way out of this nightmare. Your Majesty, I'm honored by your offer, truly I am. But surely forcing someone into such an arrangement goes against the principles of mutual respect and understanding that we both value. The Queen's laugh was like the tinkling of crystal wind chimes. Beautiful and cold. Force? You misunderstand our ways, young human. In Valkorian society, when the Queen makes such a declaration, it becomes natural law. The alternative to accepting this honor is death. The word hung in the air like a physical weight. David felt his knees go weak, and only pride kept him from collapsing right there in front of the alien ruler. I need time to consider this, he managed to say. Time you shall have, Queen Ziralith replied graciously. 3 of your Earth days to prepare yourself mentally and spiritually. The joining ceremony will take place whether you are prepared or not. Choose wisely, human David Rodriguez. Your life depends on it. As guards appeared from seemingly nowhere to escort the stunned human delegation to their quarters, David caught a glimpse of another figure entering the throne room. She was clearly Valkorian royalty, with the same elegant bearing as the Queen but younger, with kind eyes that seemed to hold sympathy for his impossible situation. Princess Kaylara had arrived, and she looked just as unhappy about this arrangement as David felt. The night before their meeting with Queen Ziralith felt like the longest of David's life. He and Princess Kaylara had spent hours in the palace archives, studying everything they could find about the ancient trial of minds. The more he learned, the more nervous he became. Are you having second thoughts? Kaylara asked as they reviewed holographic records from the last trial, conducted over 5 centuries ago. David rubbed his tired eyes. Honestly? Yes, but not about working with you. I'm worried about what happens if we're not compatible enough to pass the challenges. Kaylara nodded thoughtfully. I understand your fear, but consider this. We're already working well together. We've spent the entire night researching and planning without a single disagreement. That has to count for something. She was right. Despite coming from completely different worlds, they seemed to think in similar ways. When David suggested a research approach, Kaylara would build on it naturally. When she explained Valkorian concepts, he grasped them quickly. It felt like they were two parts of the same mind working toward a common goal. "Tell me about the mental link in the third challenge," David said. "How dangerous is it, really?" Kalara's expression grew serious. "For Valkorians, mental linking is natural. We learn to do it as children. But human minds aren't structured for it. The process could cause permanent damage to your thoughts and memories." "What kind of damage?" "In the worst cases, complete mental breakdown. Loss of personality, inability to form coherent thoughts, permanent confusion between your memories and those of others." She paused, studying his face. "Are you sure you want to risk this?" David was quiet for a long moment, thinking about his alternatives. Stay trapped in an impossible situation or take a dangerous chance at freedom. When he put it that way, the choice seemed obvious. "I'd rather risk my mind fighting for my freedom than lose my soul accepting slavery," he said finally. Kalara's eyes widened slightly. "That's a very human way of thinking. Most Valkorians would choose the safe path." "Maybe that's exactly why your people need some human influence," David replied with a small smile. The morning came too soon. David had managed only a few hours of restless sleep before the servants arrived to escort them to the throne room. His heart pounded as they walked through the crystal corridors, past gardens where alien flowers chimed like bells in the morning breeze. The throne room was packed with Valkorian nobles, their silver-blue faces turned toward the humans with expressions of curiosity and barely concealed disdain. Queen Ziraleth sat on her crystal throne looking as imposing as ever. Captain Williams and the rest of the human delegation stood to one side, clearly unhappy but powerless to intervene. "Daughter," the Queen said as they approached, "have you come to discuss the joining ceremony arrangements?" "No, Mother," Kalara replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to propose. "I've come to invoke the ancient rite of the trial of minds." The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Gasps echoed through the throne room. Several nobles began speaking rapidly in their musical language, their voices rising in what David could only assume was shock and disapproval. Queen Ziraleth's expression didn't change, but David noticed her hands tighten slightly on the arms of her throne. "The trial of minds has not been invoked for 512 years, she said carefully. "The law remains valid," Kalara said firmly. "As a member of the royal bloodline, I have the right to request the trial to determine true compatibility before any joining ceremony." "And if you fail?" the Queen asked, her voice carrying a dangerous undertone. "Then the human dies, and I accept exile as the law requires," Kalara replied without hesitation. David felt a surge of admiration for her courage. She was risking everything to give them both a chance at freedom. The Queen rose from her throne and descended the crystal steps until she stood directly in front of them. Up close, David could see the calculations running behind her alien eyes. "You realize," she said slowly, "that this trial will prove my point? The genetic scans have already shown your compatibility. The trial of minds will simply confirm what science has already revealed. If that's true," Kalara said, "then you have nothing to lose by allowing it." Queen Ziraleth smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Very well. I grant permission for the trial of minds. However, I will add one condition that is within my rights as queen." David's stomach dropped. "What condition?" "The trial will be conducted publicly, before the entire noble court. If you succeed, your victory will be witnessed by all. If you fail—" She let the sentence hang in the air like a threat. "We accept," Kalara said before David could speak. The Queen nodded. "Excellent. The trial will begin in 1 hour. Use that time to prepare yourselves mentally and spiritually. You will need all your strength for what is to come." As they were led to a preparation chamber, David felt the weight of hundreds of alien eyes following them. The human delegation looked terrified, and he caught Captain Williams trying to mouth something to him, but he couldn't make out the words. The preparation chamber was small and simple. With soft lighting and comfortable seating, a Valkorian priest waited for them, wearing robes that seemed to be made of living starlight. "I am High Counselor Veth," the priest said in a voice like distant thunder. "I will oversee your trial and ensure that all ancient protocols are followed." "Do you both enter this trial of your own free will?" "Yes," they said together. "Do you understand that failure means death for one and exile for the other?" "Yes," they repeated. "And do you swear to face each challenge with complete honesty, holding nothing back from each other or from the trial itself?" David looked at Kalara, seeing his own determination reflected in her alien features. Yes, High Counselor Veth nodded solemnly. Then let me explain what you will face. The first challenge tests your ability to work together to solve a problem that neither of you could handle alone. You will have limited time and must succeed completely or the trial ends in failure. David felt his mouth go dry. What kind of problem? That will be revealed when the challenge begins. The second challenge requires you to share your deepest fears and most painful memories with each other through our truth-sensing technology. Any attempt to hide or deceive will result in immediate failure. Kalara took a deep breath. And the third challenge? The mental link. You must join minds completely, sharing not just thoughts but the very essence of who you are. For humans, this process is extremely dangerous. For Valkorians who attempt it with non-Valkorians, the risk is almost as great. High Counselor Veth studied them both carefully. I have overseen many ceremonies in my long life, but never a trial of minds. I want you to understand that even if you are compatible, the challenges themselves might destroy you. We understand, David said, surprised by how calm his voice sounded. Then it is time, the High Counselor said. May the ancient wisdom guide you both. As they walked back toward the throne room, David felt Kalara's hand brush against his. The touch was brief, but it conveyed understanding and support. Whatever happened in the next few hours, they would face it together. The throne room had been transformed. The crystal walls now pulsed with energy, and strange devices had been brought in that hummed with power. The crowd of nobles had grown even larger, and David could feel their anticipation like a physical force. Queen Ziraleth stood beside her throne, no longer looking like a mother watching her daughter, but like a ruler about to witness either a great victory or a spectacular failure. Let the trial of minds begin, she declared, and the very air seemed to vibrate with ancient power. The first challenge materialized before them like something out of a nightmare. The crystal floor of the throne room transformed into a three-dimensional maze that stretched upward into darkness. But this wasn't just any maze. The walls moved constantly, shifting and changing every few seconds. Floating platforms appeared and disappeared without warning, and streams of energy crackled between the barriers. Your task is simple, High Counselor Veth announced to the packed throne room. Reach the center of the maze together and retrieve the Crystal of Understanding. You have exactly 20 minutes. If either of you falls or if you fail to reach the center in time, the trial ends in failure. David stared at the impossible structure, his heart sinking. How are we supposed to navigate something that keeps changing? Kalara studied the maze carefully, her alien eyes tracking patterns that David couldn't see. Look at the energy streams, she said quietly. They're not random. There's a rhythm to the changes. David watched more closely and began to see what she meant. The walls shifted in waves like a slow dance. The platforms appeared and disappeared in sequences that almost seemed musical. You're right, he said, feeling a spark of hope. It's like a puzzle with timing. But how do we solve it? Together, Kalara said simply. Your people are naturally good at creative problem-solving under pressure. My people are excellent at pattern recognition and mathematical calculation. We need both skills. They stepped onto the first platform together. Immediately, David felt the structure respond to their presence. The walls around them glowed brighter and the shifting became faster. It's reacting to us, he observed. The more we work together, the more complex it becomes. That's the point, Kalara replied, grabbing his hand as their platform began to move. The challenge isn't just about reaching the center. It's about proving we can adapt to increasingly difficult situations as a team. They jumped to the next platform, just as their first one dissolved into light. David's human reflexes and Kalara's precise timing complemented each other perfectly. When he moved too quickly, she steadied him. When she calculated too long, he urged her forward with intuitive leaps. The maze seemed to sense their growing coordination and responded by becoming even more challenging. Walls appeared suddenly in front of them, forcing them to change direction. Platforms tilted at dangerous angles, requiring them to balance against each other. Energy streams began firing in complex patterns that they had to dodge while still moving forward. There, Kalara pointed upward to a platform that was barely visible in the shifting lights. That's the path to the center level. David looked where she was pointing and felt his stomach drop. The platform was at least 15 feet away and moving in an arc that would take it out of reach in seconds. We'll never make that jump, he said. Not alone, Kalara agreed. But Valkorians can enhance our physical abilities temporarily. If you trust me completely, I can boost both of us for the jump. What do I need to do? Just trust me and don't fight the sensation. Kaylara placed her hand on David's shoulder, and immediately he felt a strange tingling sensation spread through his body. His muscles felt stronger, his reflexes sharper, his vision clearer. It was like every cell in his body had been supercharged. Together, they made the impossible jump, soaring through the air with grace that would have been impossible for either of them alone. They landed on the moving platform just as it began its swing toward the maze's center. The final obstacle was a ring of pure energy surrounding the crystal of understanding. The energy barrier pulsed with different colors, and David could feel heat radiating from it even from several feet away. The pattern, Kaylara said, studying the energy pulses. It's based on mathematical sequences, but there's something else. Something that doesn't follow logical rules. David watched the seemingly random flashes of color and suddenly understood. It's not just math. It's emotion-based. Look, the red flashes happen when the pattern gets frustrated by repetition. The blue ones happen when it finds harmony. Emotional mathematics, Kaylara breathed. Something only our combined perspectives could solve. Working together, they found the rhythm that combined Valkorian logic with human intuition. As they stepped through the energy barrier at exactly the right moment, David felt a surge of triumph. They had done something that neither species could have accomplished alone. The crystal of understanding was beautiful, pulsing with soft light that seemed to resonate with both their heartbeats. As they reached for it together, High Counselor Veth's voice echoed through the chamber. The first challenge is complete. Prepare yourselves for the second trial. The maze dissolved around them, returning the throne room to its normal configuration. The crowd of nobles was completely silent, clearly shocked that the human and princess had succeeded. Queen Zyraleth's expression was unreadable, but David thought he saw a flicker of something that might have been respect in her alien eyes. The second challenge, High Counselor Veth announced, requires complete emotional honesty. You will be connected to the truth crystal, which will reveal your deepest fears and most painful memories to each other. Any attempt to hide or deceive will result in immediate failure. A new device rose from the floor between them. It looked like a sculpture made of living light, beautiful but somehow terrifying. David could feel its power even from several feet away, like a gentle pressure against his mind. Place your hands on the crystal, the High Counselor instructed. Speak your deepest fear aloud and allow your partner to see the memory that created that fear. David looked at Kaylara, seeing his own nervousness reflected in her features. This was perhaps even more frightening than the physical challenge. Being vulnerable with someone was always scary, but doing it in front of hundreds of alien witnesses felt almost impossible. I'll go first, he said, placing his hand on the warm surface of the truth crystal. Immediately, images began flowing through the air around them. David felt exposed, as if every private moment of his life was on display. But he forced himself to speak. My deepest fear is being completely alone, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. When I was 12, my parents died in an accident. I spent 3 years in foster care, moving from home to home, never belonging anywhere. I'm terrified of being abandoned again. The crystal pulsed, and suddenly everyone in the room could see his memories. The confused child at his parents' funeral, the lonely teenager packing his few belongings to move to yet another temporary home, the young man throwing himself into his studies to avoid forming attachments that might hurt him. Kaylara's hand covered his on the crystal, and her warmth seemed to chase away the chill of those old memories. My deepest fear, she said softly, is that I'll never be more than what others expect me to be. I've spent my entire life being the perfect princess, making the choices that were expected rather than the choices I wanted. I'm terrified that I don't actually have a true self underneath all the expectations. Her memories flowed around them. A child being taught to suppress her natural curiosity because it wasn't proper. A teenager having every decision made for her by advisors and protocols. A young woman watching other people live authentic lives while she remained trapped in a role she had never chosen. As their memories intertwined in the crystal's light, David felt something extraordinary happen. Their fears, instead of driving them apart, created a bridge of understanding between them. They were both people who had lost their freedom in different ways, both searching for authentic connection in a world that seemed determined to keep them isolated. The second challenge is complete, High Counselor Veth announced, his voice filled with something that sounded like surprise. David and Kaylara looked at each other with new understanding. They had shared their deepest vulnerabilities and discovered that instead of being weakened by the experience, they felt stronger together, but the hardest challenge still lay ahead. "Prepare yourselves for the mental link," the High Counselor said solemnly. "This is the test that will determine not just your compatibility, but whether you can survive the joining of two very different minds." The mental linking device looked nothing like the previous challenges. It was simpler, just two crystal headpieces connected by streams of flowing energy. But David could feel its power radiating through the throne room like invisible lightning. "Before we begin the final challenge," High Counselor Veth said solemnly, "I must warn you once more. Human minds are not designed for Valkorian mental links. The process could permanently damage your thoughts, your memories, even your personality. Are you certain you wish to proceed?" David looked around the packed throne room. Hundreds of alien faces stared back at him, some curious, others clearly hoping to witness his failure. Captain Williams and his fellow humans watched with expressions of terror and helplessness. Queen Ziraleth sat motionless on her throne, but her eyes burned with intense focus. Then he looked at Kaylara. Despite everything they had been through, despite the genuine connection they had formed, he realized he still barely knew her. They had shared fears and worked together beautifully, but linking minds was something entirely different. He would be opening every thought, every memory, every part of himself to someone from another world. "David," Kaylara said quietly, "you don't have to do this. I could tell my mother that I refuse to continue. You could return to your people. And what would happen to you?" Her smile was sad but peaceful. "Exile isn't the worst fate. I've always wanted to see other worlds anyway." The fact that she was willing to sacrifice her position and her entire life just to free him from this situation hit David harder than he expected. This wasn't just about compatibility anymore. This was about two people who had genuinely come to care for each other despite impossible circumstances. "No," he said firmly. "We finish this together. We've come too far to give up now." They approached the linking device together. The crystal headpieces felt warm against their skin, and David immediately sensed something changing in his mind. It was subtle at first, like hearing a distant conversation in another room. "The connection is beginning," High Counselor Veth announced. "You must now open your minds completely to each other. Hold nothing back. The link will show whether your thoughts can truly harmonize or whether they will destroy each other." David felt Kaylara's presence in his mind like a gentle touch. Her thoughts were different from his in ways he couldn't have imagined. Where his mind was chaotic and creative, jumping from idea to idea, hers was structured and flowing, like a river following a carefully carved channel. But instead of clashing, their different mental patterns began to dance around each other. His creativity sparked new pathways in her logical frameworks. Her structured thinking helped organize his scattered inspirations into coherent ideas. "It's working," Kaylara's voice echoed in his mind, though her lips hadn't moved. "I can feel your thoughts, but they're not overwhelming mine. They're enhancing them." Through the link, David experienced memories that weren't his own. He saw Zephyria through Valkorian eyes, understanding for the first time the true beauty and tragedy of their civilization. He felt Kaylara's lifelong loneliness, her desperate desire to break free from the perfect prison of royal expectations. At the same time, she was experiencing his memories, the wonder of human childhood, the pain of loss, the excitement of scientific discovery, the simple joy of laughing with friends. Through her alien perception, he saw his own species with new clarity. "Your emotions," her mental voice was filled with amazement. "They're so intense, so vibrant. I never realized what we lost when we suppressed ours." "And your clarity," David responded through the link. "The way you can see patterns and connections. It's incredible. We really do complement each other." But then something went wrong. David felt a sharp pain in his head as the link suddenly intensified. His human brain wasn't designed for this level of mental connection, and he could feel his consciousness beginning to fray at the edges. Through the link, he sensed Kaylara's panic as she realized what was happening. "David, you need to disconnect. The link is too strong for your mind. I can handle it, he tried to project, but even as he said it, he felt his thoughts scattering like leaves in a storm. Memories began mixing together until he couldn't tell which ones were his and which were hers. In the throne room, the watching crowd murmured with concern as David's body began to shake. His vital signs, displayed on Valkorian monitoring devices, showed dangerous fluctuations. "Shut it down," Captain Williams shouted from across the room. "You're killing him." But High Counselor Veth shook his head grimly. Once begun, the mental link cannot be safely interrupted. They must complete the process, or both minds will be permanently damaged. That's when something extraordinary happened. Instead of trying to maintain the overwhelming connection, Kalara began to change her own mental patterns. She deliberately made her thoughts more chaotic, more emotional, more human-like. By meeting David halfway, she reduced the strain on his mind while still maintaining the link. "What are you doing?" David asked through their shared consciousness. "Learning," she replied. "Learning to think like you do. Learning to feel the way humans feel. If we're going to survive this together, I need to become partially human, just as you're becoming partially Valkorian." The pain in David's head began to subside as their mental patterns found a new equilibrium. Neither fully human nor fully Valkorian, but something new and unique that belonged to both of them. Through their joined consciousness, they began to see possibilities that neither species had considered. Ways that human creativity and Valkorian logic could solve problems that had stumped both civilizations for centuries. Technologies that could be developed by combining human intuition with alien precision. Cultural exchanges that could enrich both worlds. Most importantly, they saw each other completely and truly, without any barriers or pretense. David saw that Kalara was not just intelligent and compassionate, but brave beyond measure and willing to sacrifice everything for what she believed was right. Kalara saw that David was not just clever and adaptable, but possessed a strength of character that could inspire others to be better than they thought possible. "The link is stabilizing," High Counselor Veth announced, his voice filled with wonder. "I have never seen anything like this. They are maintaining individual consciousness while achieving true mental harmony." Queen Ziralith rose from her throne and approached the linked pair. Through the connection, both David and Kalara sensed her presence before she spoke. "Remarkable," the Queen said softly. "You have not only passed the trial of minds, you have transcended it. You have shown that two different species can unite without losing what makes them unique." The mental link began to fade naturally as the challenge reached its conclusion. David felt Kalara's thoughts withdraw from his mind, but the understanding they had gained remained. They looked at each other with new eyes, seeing not just a human and an alien, but two people who had chosen to face the impossible together. "You have proven your compatibility beyond all doubt," Queen Ziralith continued. "But more than that, you have shown me something I had not considered. True partnership cannot be forced, even for the best of reasons. It must be chosen freely by both parties." She gestured, and the crystal devices dissolved into light. "I hereby grant you both the freedom to choose your own path forward. The joining ceremony will proceed only if you both desire it." David and Kalara looked at each other, still processing everything they had experienced through the mental link. They had seen each other's souls completely, and what they had found there was not just compatibility but genuine love and respect. "I choose to stay," David said, taking Kalara's hand. "Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because, together, we can build something beautiful for both our peoples." "And I choose him," Kalara said, squeezing his hand, "not as a duty to my royal blood, but as a choice made by my own heart." Queen Ziralith smiled, and for the first time since David had met her, it was a smile of genuine warmth. "Then let this be the beginning of a new age of cooperation between our worlds. May your union be the first of many bonds between our species, all chosen freely and based on mutual respect and understanding." The throne room erupted in cheers from both Valkorian nobles and human diplomats. David and Kalara had not only saved themselves but opened a door to friendship between two very different worlds. Their love story had become something much larger, the foundation for peace and cooperation across the stars.